Testing. All right. We're all good. The first thing I want to express is gratitude, because I definitely do not feel qualified to be speaking to all of you amazing people with far more accomplishments than me. I view myself as a learner and a doer. It was an event like this about 10 years ago that inspired me to believe that I could be an entrepreneur. There was a startup event. I was watching all these entrepreneurs pitch. I knew my college basketball career was coming to a close, and I had to think about what was next for me. And to any entrepreneur here who has a goal, has a dream, has a vision, honestly, the reason I do feel qualified to talk to you is because of my failures. That is the reason why I do feel qualified to be in the role that I am today. I want to give it a second because I believe I have a presentation that will show up here in a second. If not, we can look at my face the whole time, but it might be hard to enjoy your dinner, so. Let's see. Yeah, all good. So I'll keep going. So what qualifies me to be the founder and CEO of Sober Sidekick is my failures. I am someone who spent years of my life in chronic addiction. I hit a rock bottom, and it was a real rock bottom. Thanksgiving Day 2018, I woke up on the sidewalk for the fourth day in a row in LA. I'd only been in LA for about 30 days. No phone, no wallet, wearing hospital pants. My addiction at that point in time was at a point where I couldn't walk straight when I didn't have alcohol in my system. I couldn't talk straight when I didn't have alcohol in my system. And I had reached a point of, pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization is the term. And I was sitting there on the sidewalk, Thanksgiving Day, watching people walk in and out of the supermarket, thinking, how did I get here? How did I get here? The reason I'm alive today is because the right people were willing to meet me where I was at. And they weren't healthcare professionals. They weren't, therapists. They weren't psychiatrists. They were people who had been there, people who had been to hell and back. And for me, in my relationship with failure, I've come to be grateful for all of my failures. And we're going to take a step back. I'm going to rewind a little bit. So here we have two guys. One climbed up the cliff, straight path, made it all the way to the top. And, that's how we paint many stories to be. That's how my story might be painted if we were to, look at my LinkedIn or something. But the reality of every entrepreneur's journey looks like this. And I went to an event like this 10 years ago, and I came out a few months later with a startup idea. And I got really lucky. I got a small amount of seed funding. I was a business major at the time. I got a really seasoned business partner who came and joined me. And got to work. And, it was a fun idea. We basically came up with this karma algorithm for undiscovered musicians to where the more you promote other artists, the more you give them feedback, the more feedback you receive. I realized very quickly that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to build things. But along the way, I realized that I was going to be a dad, and I was 21 at the time, and all of a sudden, these stakes that I built around this startup were incredibly high to me, and got the app to launch, and for the first hour of the launch, I thought, we might actually make it. This might actually work. We began to go viral on Twitter, and Jay-Z retweeted our app, Ellen DeGeneres retweeted our app, and then here comes the first failure. The servers weren't set to auto-scale. So 40,000 downloads in the trending box on Twitter, and the app doesn't work for anyone. And our developers are overseas. We're trying to get a hold of them, and we can't. It's too late. The moment passes, and I realize this is the beginning of the end for this startup. And all these fears, meanwhile, creeping up more and more dramatically about this impending life change that's about to change my life forever. And it was at that point in time where alcohol became not my problem, but my solution. Fear. Fear was, the fears I did not know how to cope with. It didn't make my life fall all apart at once. In fact, it helped me. It helped me get through the day. It gave me that breath of relief, as the stress began to creep up more and more and more. And eventually the time came, she was born. I was the first in the world to hold her. And I was all in. Didn't know where things were going next, but I was all in. And then a few months later, I actually discovered that I was not her dad. And it was at that point in time where alcohol was my only way out. It was my only escape. I was 21 at the time. I did not know how to cope. I did not know how to deal with it. And, I developed this mindset where, if you were in this exact situation, you would be drinking too. And I became a victim of my alcoholism. And that victim path, that victim narrative, got me to the point where I was Thanksgiving Day 2018, a few years later. But fortunately, the right people showed up for me that day, and they gave me belief, they gave me hope that day, Thanksgiving Day, November 22nd, 2018, that day could be day one of my comeback story. And I'm happy to say I haven't had a drink or anything in my system since. I celebrated 5 years of sobriety. Yeah, and what I'll say is everything I've learned through my entrepreneurship journey is dependent on my learnings in my recovery journey. And it was through my recovery journey where I learned how to handle fear. I learned how to address these issues that were crippling me for so long. But shortly into my recovery journey, I began to realize I'm not that unique. I'm not alone. And there's 40 million Americans who chronically battle addiction just like me. And what a lot of people think is the problem is that 6 out of 7 of them never get to rehab, never get to a treatment center. But the problem I began to discover is that 3 to 5% of those who complete a stay in a treatment center remain sober for a year. 95% of those who complete a highly expensive stay in treatment stay sober. And, simply put, relapses, suicides, mental health crises, they don't happen in therapy sessions. They happen in the moments where people are alone. yet we built an entire system optimized for crisis. It actually creates demand for crisis. And, as a result, like the average person who goes to rehab once goes 7 times. I went 3 times in 3 months, and I've met people who have been to rehab 30 times. And, there becomes less and less motivation to solve the problem, because one of the things Jordan mentioned, we have to empower the individual to take responsibility for their own life. We have to remind them of their own power. And that's what my peers were able to do for me in my recovery journey. They were able to remind me of my role in my own mental health journey. Because if everything is someone else's fault, my life can never get better. But any area of my life where I can see my role and my responsibility, that's an area of life that can improve, that can get better. And, in terms of failure, if we leave our ego out of it, it's just a learning opportunity. That's all it is. That's all it is. So 30 days into my recovery journey, I'm sitting, it's Christmas Eve, I'm in a sober living, and I'm surrounded by these new people who became lifelong friends, who are still friends to this day. And I was beginning to realize I think I'm on a different trajectory now. And I am so grateful to have connected with these people at this point in time. And, I asked myself, why did it take me this long to put myself out there? It all came down to guilt, shame, and fear. And I asked myself, what if we could lower those barriers to entry to making those life-saving connections, to making those connections that I was experiencing on a day-to-day accessible to everyone. And this is where my first failure, that karma algorithm for undiscovered musicians, it just made perfect sense. Why not use this for people in recovery? They're already doing this in AA meetings, left and right. So I got right to work. I started coding, and 30 days later, Apple approved a very, very shitty MVP. I was just happy to have something to work on, honestly. I had no expectations. I love to code. I love to build things. And, day one, and this is day one in the App Store, I began to see people pop up on the app that weren't my friends or weren't even friends of friends. And then that's when I realized, oh, wow, there might be truly something here, because people are somehow finding this on the 3rd page of a search in the App Store, which means they aren't finding a solution anywhere else. And, this value proposition of creating a world where connecting with those right people at that right time is no longer up to chance, and our core hypothesis, which was through this empathy algorithm, through this platform, no one would ever go without support. So I'll give you a quick window into what that looks like. This is a real post from the platform. And what you'll see here is this person had the courage to be vulnerable. And part of that is she is able to be anonymous in this platform. So she was able to spill her heart out into this platform. And within minutes, if not seconds, 17 people reached out to her with heartfelt support. And one thing about the support that she received is this is actually not a success story. This is the average user experience. So every single person who posts within this platform, because of this karma algorithm, because of this empathy algorithm, they receive written support from a member of their own community in minutes, if not seconds. So that means a single mom who works 2 jobs, gets off at midnight. The cravings are hitting, the isolation is hitting, the loneliness is hitting. And she writes a post on Sober Sidekick. Within minutes, multiple single moms have reached out to her, letting her know that she's not alone, letting her know that she has power over her journey. And, because people, simply put, people are most likely to make behavioral change when they feel they're not alone. I feel like that's a very simple statement, a very simple hypothesis, but, as people walk through this journey, the odds are truly, truly against them. We know the fact that 95% of people who get sober relapse within a year. 50% of those who get to 1 year sober don't get to 2 years sober. Because the problem is, this is a lifelong disease. Alcohol was never my problem, it was my solution. And it was my solution for trauma, it was my solution for isolation, it was my solution for not feeling good enough. So in order for people to truly recover, they have to invest in their mental fitness. Not their mental health, their mental fitness. And we've designed a system around mental illness, mental health, that is built to treat crisis, creates demand for crisis. And an analogy I like to make is if everyone felt they needed a physical trainer to go to the gym, a licensed physical trainer to go to the gym, not many people would go to the gym. But that's exactly how we treat mental health. Oh, if you want to work on your mental health, you need a therapist. And I'm not knocking therapy. Therapy is an elevator for your mental health. But why not meet people where they're at? Why not focus on how we can empower the individual to take ownership of their recovery journey? Because simply put, there's not enough mental health professionals to solve this problem. If you do the math just doesn't math. People are willing to support each other, and if you can capture that willingness that people have to show empathy to one another, if you can optimize it, if you can gamify it, if you can track it, if you can measure it, then all of a sudden you might have a solution for a major healthcare problem. So the next thing I want to talk about is focus. So built this platform while living in a sober living. 2 years later, I finally made it out of the sober living. I'm starting to build my life. The platform has 10,000 members. It's growing fast. And, people love the platform. But then the question becomes, how do I turn this into a business that can change the world? Because I can only do so much by myself. So we tested our first revenue model at that point in time, and this model was focused on providers. We discovered that there's a huge marketing problem for rehabs in the U.S. Generally, for-profit rehabs, it's costing them $10,000 in marketing per patient they acquire. And as a result, there's many illegal, unethical tactics that they're using to get their patients instead. So we had a thesis, what if we could be the ones to provide an ethical platform for people to get the right help at the right point in time? And that model, it actually worked. It worked the first time. And it went from 0 to about 80K in MRR in 6 months. And then it was like overnight, all of a sudden, I had a business. I didn't just have an app. I had a business, and things on paper were working. But the more we got into this, the more this question became more and more glaring, which is, who did we build Sober Sidekick for? And the more we worked with these providers, the more we realized that there was a fundamental misalignment between the outcomes they wanted to see versus the outcomes we wanted to see for our population, for our member base. And, there's, to give a few examples, there's actually human trafficking laws that have been written specifically for rehabs in the US as a result of all of the predatory tactics to get people into treatment and to keep people in treatment. And the reason why there's so much is the reimbursement rates for rehab-only cancer is billing insurers more per member. So some facilities are billing you, your insurer, $2,500 a day for 30 days that the person is there, and they've done the math, and this person is going to repeat and come back 5 or 6 times if we build a really good relationship with them, if we enable them. They'll keep coming back. And some have gone even as far as to pay addicts to keep coming back to their own facilities. And what I thought was, when I started this business model, is that this is an edge case. That's what I truly believed at that point in time. I did months and months of vetting on the customers I brought in. And what I discovered really quickly is that pretty much all of my customers were somewhere on the spectrum. Like, there's a really, really bad stuff that's going on, and then there's a whole spectrum of things going on in between, and that's because of a fundamental misalignment where they actually have no incentive for people to stay sober, but they have hundreds of thousands of dollars in incentives for people to keep relapsing. So we decided we're not going to scale this model any further, and we found ourselves spending all of our time babysitting our customers and making sure they were following our terms and conditions, making sure that they weren't going too far. And we got to a point where we really had to ask ourselves, like, how long can we keep doing this? How long can we keep playing the middle? So at that point in time, I decided that, if you look at the market, those who are paying for treatment, those who are paying for these constant trips to rehabs, these are the payers. These are the health insurers, these are the employers. What if we built a model for them? And I knew we had to pivot. I knew we had to get out of this model. And I started trying to fundraise off of this new model. Meanwhile, we continue to have the monthly revenue coming in from the existing model that we were hoping to get away from. And what I found is the more and more I pitched VCs, the more I got the question of, like, why not scale this revenue that you already have? Like, something's working, why not scale it? And I would explain why, and they would be skeptical. They wouldn't necessarily believe it can't be that bad, And finally, I got to a point where in December of 2021, a VC told us that they would be willing to lead our round if we were willing to scale this model that we had. And it was at that point in time where I made a decision to burn the boats. And I realized I can't keep trying to play the middle. And we ended up firing all of our customers, did not have any investors at that point in time. But I knew at that point in time I was getting burnt out because I wasn't building something that was worth fighting for. And if we're going to do this, building a startup is hard either way. Regardless of whether you're doing something good for the world or doing something bad for the world, building a startup is hard. And I can't keep building something that I don't believe in. So we made that decision. And the great thing about burning the boats is the only way out is through. And that's where we discovered we already have something way bigger than we've been selling to providers. And I'm going to slide over here. We realized that we have something that the payers who are paying $43 billion a year to treat this population, we have something that they desperately, desperately need. We built a value proposition based off of data, based off of outcomes, based off of real people using our platform. And when I went out to ask payers, hey, what do you know about this population before they enter rehab? They say nothing. I asked payers, what do you know about this population in between the 7 round trips to treatment that they're making? They say nothing. I asked them how much they're spending on this population at a per member level, and it's only their cancer medical loss ratios are worse. So we began to hypothesize a new model that's never been sold to payers before, and we began to fundraise off of this new model. And it's at that point in time, and I feel like I just stopped us in an awkward spot, but it's at that point in time, as I'm fundraising, I'm realizing that burning the boats actually made me more attractive to the right investors. It was so incredibly surprising that going from 80 MRR to 0, the right investors wanted to talk to me. And in Vegas at a conference, I met a guy named Michael Brothers. I told him my story the same way I told you, and he said, that happened to my son. Only my son is permanently disabled due to addiction. And then he told me, I was the CEO of Humana's plan in Florida, and I have a fund that invests only in companies that I believe I can sell to the largest health plans in the world. And he also told me that day, I'll be the guy who tells you not to take the money if it's going to cause you to compromise why you started this. And that is one clear example of, that willingness to focus on what matters to us, and only we can decide what matters to us, but that willingness to focus on what matters most to us can attract the right partners at the right time, and truly enable me to move faster than I had been able to move at that point. And in June of 2023, we closed our seed round, and it was filled with the American Heart Association, Michael Brothers and Ikigai, Ramsey Ball, who was one of our first supporters and biggest supporters. And a world-renowned healthcare fund out of Barcelona called Nina Capital. And the reason everyone joined our round is because we want to see this problem solved. We want to see this problem solved. And we know that if you are the first to solve it, this is a multi-billion-dollar company, if we can get to that point. And we only brought in investors who we believed could help us get closer to that goal, who could help us open doors, unlock opportunities. And we closed that seed round on the thesis that we could get 3 Medicaid providers, or Medicaid payers, as paid contracts within the next 18 to 24 months. With the right mission-aligned partners in place, I also brought in Jordan Carlisle about that point in time. And one thing I'll say is, since we hired Jordan Carlisle, our user base doubled. So I don't know what he did, but someday you'll have to tell me what you did, and we went after payers. And the reason why a lot of people didn't want to invest in us at that seed stage is selling to payers is the hardest way to sell in healthcare. The sales cycle is typically 2 to 4 years. It's very difficult to get in, and it's a huge win if you can get there. But I'll be honest, I am a first-time CEO in healthcare, and I don't blame anyone for having skepticism that I could sell this to payers. But what I did have is I had amazing mentors around me, amazing investors around me who could help us get there. And within 90 days of closing our seed round, we went from first conversation to close with a Medicaid plan in Georgia. And we realized we truly do have something here. And I'm just going to browse through the data really quickly so we all understand what it is we're bringing to the market. So right here, you see that 124,000 people have reported their sobriety to Sober Sidekick over the last 12 months. That's more data around sobriety and relapse than any other platform in the world. And we can see real time when people relapse. So Sober Sidekick is the first to know when someone relapses. And these are expensive relapses, $6,000 to $20,000 sometimes per relapse. And we walk into the health plan's doors and we show this to them up front. It's not you work with us and then one day you'll get these outcomes. Hey, here's what we're already doing within your market. And then one of the biggest realizations is that we can reverse engineer relapse. We can see the themes in those who stay sober and those who don't. And one of the biggest themes we see, as I mentioned, isolation was my enemy. Horizontally, we had the rate at which members are reporting relapses on a monthly basis. And vertically, we have broken down cohort by cohort, how many times have they engaged with their peers that given month. And we see an incredible drop in relapse rate by just getting someone to talk to, engage with one peer on a monthly basis. And we're talking to health plans that are spending hundreds or thousands of dollars a day on patients, in inpatient, outpatient, and we're telling them, hey, all you have to do is partner with us and invest in the moments where people are alone. And another thing is when the health plan pays a treatment center, all the treatment center can tell them is whether or not they AMA'd or not, whether or not they left early or not. But they have no idea what happens after they leave unless another claim hits. But Sober Sidekick, as a result of keeping people engaged months and years into their journey, they can actually see how the rate of relapse changes over time, months and years into the journey. And one of the things Jordan alluded to is transparency around outcomes. And unfortunately in healthcare, there's oftentimes incentive to not be very transparent around outcomes. And that's what's led to so many of the vicious cycles that we've seen. And then one thing that happened since Jordan joined is we launched machine learning that can actually predict relapse, the likelihood of relapse, 2 weeks in advance with 95% accuracy. So we're going to health plans who are typically reacting to claims data, typically reacting to, that number is out of date, it's gone up a few points since then, who are typically reacting to, oh, this person hit the emergency room, how can we get them a resource so that they don't relapse again? Versus Sober Sidekick is saying, hey, let's help this person now. Their risk of relapse is going up. They've written a post that indicates that there's trauma, this and that, and we can truly shift an entire system, an entire population from crisis management to preventative health, mental fitness, and avoidance. So it was this model that enabled us to move faster than we expected we could. Then shortly after that, we got 2 of the largest health plans in the world to the final stages of red lines. And then that's where our existing investors said, okay, it's time to double down. You all are ahead of the curve. We have an opportunity to be the first with a truly, truly value-based platform for the entire space. So here we look at the cost nationwide being spent on substance abuse. We're talking about around $46 billion. And then we're able to predict as a result of being able to engage, intervene, Sober Sidekick is able to reduce the average relapse rate of an entire population. So here, when we walk into a health plan's door, we can build a model with their actuaries that enables them to save thousands per member per year and give us anywhere from 20 to 50% shared savings. Now, that's very, very important to me because I want this company, I want this platform, I want our success to be dependent on our ability to help the addict that everyone else has given up on. I want our success to be dependent on our ability to prevent relapse. I want our success to be dependent on our ability to scale epic real-life comeback stories, because that's what recovery is. I met so many amazing people who have had worse bottoms than me, worse rock bottoms than me, and have accomplished 10x more than I will ever accomplish. And all of this comes down to one moment where the right person showed up for them at the right point in time. And that's what we can scale. That's what we can build if we're aligned, if we're focused, and if I forgot what I was going to say there. So, yeah. So we become the largest virtual recovery community in the world. We have 3 employees. Also, I want to highlight that our first full-time employee after Arkansas came from the Venture Intern Program from University of Arkansas. Yeah, and I'm from the Philadelphia area. I flew to LA to go to rehab, and I lived there for 4 years. That's where I started this company. Around 3 years ago, a friend of mine, Emma Willis, connected me with a couple people, Rogelio and Ramsey Ball, and we got to know each other over Zoom, and that was enough for me to make a trip to come out and just see what was going on in Arkansas. And I didn't have any Arkansas, and honestly, I was a little bit nervous. To be honest. I came here, and I was forming a really deep friendship with Ramsey. He was one of our first investors. In fact, our first angel investor is Cash Acre, right there, first ever. But I really quickly began to meet incredible people who were incredibly mission aligned. That first trip was great. And then I met Paige Jernigan, and I think it was our second talk where you're like, I want to invest. And then since then, she's joined our board, and she's been an incredible ally to this point. But that was my first trip. Then I got invited to the Heartland Summit. And I came here, and I saw the thesis of whole health. I saw the thesis of the region. And I began to realize, this town is a startup, and there's an opportunity for me to get in on the ground floor. Thanks to my girlfriend, who was willing to do this, my third trip was looking at houses here. And there was just very quickly a multiplier effect in this region. I met Jordan Carlisle around that time, and I met so many other people. And the other thing is, the people I met here were introducing me to the CEO of Optum, or professors from Harvard, or Jessica Matthews wrote about us, and then a Harvard case study came out of it. And all these random things that just couldn't have happened anywhere else. And I moved here with a gut feeling that there was something about this region, and since then, in all the time I spent here, everything has just been an incredible multiplier effect. Our platform has grown. All of our full-time employees are here, and we live in the back of Ramsey's office. He can sometimes be a distraction, but we've had a few talks. but that's the funnest office you could possibly work out of. So I believe I have 5 minutes remaining, but I don't think I need it. I'm just super grateful to be here. Thank you all for having me. Once again, I'm not qualified to speak to you all, but I hope to these young entrepreneurs you can see that if that knucklehead can do it, so can I. So that's all I got. Thank you so much.